At this point, I have sufficiently shown that I really like My Hero Academia. Like, really like. Half my channel is on this goddamn show, and trust me, it wouldn't be if I didn't enjoy it. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. There are many small issues throughout it that can and do bother a great number of people, and I am no exception. I have my Achilles heel when it comes to this series. So today, I would like to talk about the one thing that really bothers me about it. But to do that, we're gonna have to go into manga spoiler territory. So this is your one and only warning. But even when My Hero Academia lets me down, you know who will never do that? Opera GX, today's sponsor. Yes, the gaming browser has been kind enough to sponsor us yet again. Opera GX is a browser for gamers that you have certainly heard about here and there, either on YouTube or online. You probably have also heard about its main features, such as a CPU and RAM limiter so you don't have any lag while you're gaming, a VPN, and Discord integration all inside the web browser. However, Opera GX receives continuous updates and gets new features all the time. For example, the integration of message services like WhatsApp and Facebook, or custom animated wallpapers that just animate in the background while you do whatever you do online. And like, I know, jumping main browser is a big deal, but Opera makes that so smooth and easy. Don't want to give up on your favorite Google Chrome extensions? Opera has not just its own app store, but an integrated Google App Store as well, so you can just transfer your Google extensions onto Opera as well. Don't want to lose all the bookmarks and other things you've saved in your current browser? Well, Opera has you covered with the quick import tool. 2 clicks and all your bookmarks and everything is installed, no problem, transferred without any hiccups. Another new feature is GX Mobile, which is the mobile companion to the Opera GX browser. This handy app allows you to send files between your PC and your phone seamlessly as they have a flow between the 2 browser tabs, as well as just giving you updates and releases for upcoming games. And beyond the heavy hitters, there is also a lot of small good features that are integrated, such as a GX Cleaner, which can just clean out the junk that you have, and pop-out video, which is exactly what it sounds like. If this sounds at all interesting to you, please visit the link in the description and download Opera GX today to really experience this awesome gaming browser. If you do, write a comment, tell me that you did, and maybe we can chat a little. Before we get into the thing itself, I would like to establish something. What was it that really gripped you first about My Hero Academia? This isn't a rhetoric question, I genuinely want to know, reply in the comments. In any event, for me, it was Deku and his narrative of change and growth. I told this story on the channel before, but when I discovered MHA, I was in a place where I really needed a dose of inspirational optimism, and Deku clawing his fingers into the ground and screaming shirtless at the beach was exactly that. But beyond the initial emotional investment, what kept me watching and rewatching was his progression and drive. Every step of the way, Deku had to claw and struggle his way towards greatness, sometimes in smaller, sometimes in bigger ways. Full Cowling is one of my favorite power-ups ever, for example, because it takes a super small, simple step and turns it into a monumental turning point. It's not just an increase in power, it's a change in mindset. Shoot style, while memeable as fuck, is similar, wherein a tiny realization about his fighting style changes Deku's power set completely. This rhythm of progress is what I would have called once purely Deku, taking small upgrades and making them feel huge not because of their immediate potency, but because of how their emergence affects the way Deku sees himself and his power. It's a really cool chain of the moment of realization to process of implementation to full awakening. We don't get giant training arcs focused on each ability, but instead key scenes and sections dedicated to each step of this cycle. Let's run through one example, Air Force. The moment of realization is when Deku is reminded by All Might that higher percentages of power can weaponize wind pressure itself. Here, Deku is made to once more rethink how he perceives his power and how that perception limits him. He always saw One for All as the punchy power All Might used, so this avenue was completely obscure to him, but by just opening up his mind a little, he is ready to gain a powerful new weapon. Then, we get his process of implementation, where he trains together with All Might on perfecting this ability, as well as asking Hatsume, my wife, for a new gear upgrade. This stage is easily overlooked, but so crucial in my opinion. Not only do we get familiar with the intricacies of the move and its percentage flow, but we also get attached to it. Think of how popular Naruto's Sage Mode is, a popularity that I think is due to us getting to see him train, struggle at it, and master it in the end. This is because abilities are kinda like characters. By watching them grow, we ourselves grow attached. Deku and his Air Force here is no different. By seeing him learn it step by step, by it taking up space in the story, not only do we build anticipation to the mastery, but we also create a relationship, a connection between us and the power, between the object of reading and our experience reading it. In the final step, the full awakening happens, when Deku triumphantly debuts Air Force in his fight against Gentle. This moment is not only raw as hell, it is earned because we have, together with Deku, anticipated and worked towards it. There's a real sense of accomplishment and in turn of growth, and more importantly, it puts us parallel to Deku. He is relieved, happy, triumphant that he's managed to do this, and we are similarly because we have gone on this journey with him. And this is what I like to see from Deku, and something that I think was done very well for the majority of his character arc. Okay, I know, this was a really long-winded establishment, but what I need you to understand is how much I like this cycle, this cadence of Deku's progression that persists up to Air Force. Just keep this cycle in mind. Because now that you know that, we can talk about what is, in my opinion, My Hero Academia's biggest mistake so far. The 6 quirks. But not in the way you might think. When Chapter 213 first dropped, the internet was aflame with hot takes about how MHA is ruined and how this defeats the whole point of Deku and the series. My position is none of that, as I in fact made my one and only chapter review to that chapter, saying how I like this reveal. The setup is so cool in that we reasonably could have predicted it but didn't. One for All includes a quirk that passes on quirks, so there is no reason it wouldn't also nab the powers of those it passes through. All good. I also don't have an issue with Deku getting more powers as a concept. Punches and kicks could have easily gotten boring in the long run, so I'm not against rounding out his moveset. My one condition was that I wanted his powers to not be super strong on their own, but instead to be utility focused and supplementary. And I pretty much got my wish. While we haven't seen all powers as I'm writing this, the ones that have popped up are exactly what I wanted. Between the strong stars like Black Whip and Fajin, to the utility of Smokescreen and Danger Sense, Deku now has a cool power gradient to choose from that nonetheless doesn't eclipse One for All's strength quirk itself. And it has really transformed his fighting style in a positive way. And while we don't know the second's quirk yet, and I swear to god if it is Explosion, I'm offing myself, I'm sure it'll fall into this range too. So, basically, I do not have a problem with the setup, the moment of realization, nor with the final result, the full awakening, when it comes to the entirety of the 6 quirk reveal. No, my issue lies in the second step of the cycle, the process of implementation. Namely because for the 6 quirks, this step straight up doesn't exist. Okay, no, that is too harsh. Black Whip actually does go through this entire cycle, albeit not in the most elegant fashion. After the main reveal, Deku rethinks his relationship with Black Whip and One for All as a whole, realizing that the power isn't something to struggle against, but an ally that will reward his trust with strength and control. This presents a small moment of realization for Black Whip specifically. He then goes on to train it, both on and off screen. I do wish we would see more of the actual process here, but as this coincides with the villain plot kicking into high gear, it's understandable. Deku very much disappears from the story for a while. And he does babble on about his process quite a bit during Endeavor Agency, so that's neat. And while we don't get a bespoke moment of full awakening, Deku lifting those cars when he saves Natsuo is a testament to how far he has gotten and can stand in for this step. So, Black Whip gets a complete, if kinda wonky, version of the Deku cycle. But it, unfortunately, is the quirk that gets it the best, as all subsequent powers suffer from various issues in this regard. Shortly after the reveal during joint training, Deku and Bakugo are given a notebook by All Might that contains all information on the previous users. While this scene is the introduction to Float, what's even more important is that this scene is a fundamental shift for our relation with the power of One for All. Up until this point, our knowledge of One for All was parallel to Deku's. As he learned more about it, so did we. Our knowledge was always more or less the same. But here, Deku learns the quirks of almost all users and we don't. There is suddenly a rift between us and Deku, a chasm of knowledge that we cannot overcome because we're just bereft of it. And while I get that this was done for the sake of mystery, in my opinion, this completely backfires. Because we're now separated from Deku in terms of knowledge, the cycle I've illustrated is completely out of whack because we simply cannot get insight into his realizations anymore, at least not in the moment. He's learning about what the future holds and probably has thoughts and feelings on it, but we simply aren't privy to that. This disconnect in turn makes all upcoming powers really hard to connect to, because the big influence they might have on Deku's mindset happens so separate from us. I unironically think it would have been better if we had learned everything Deku learns here alongside with him, and had followed his thought process from this, thus making a more natural segue into the cycle. And look, I'm not saying this rough scheme I made up is a hard rule the story has to follow, but it's worked for it in the past, and shit's been wonky ever since it stopped doing it, so maybe it's a good guideline. Again, I don't think Hori has this written out on his office, but when you look at the way he's written up to Air Force, you can definitely see this happening. And ever since he stopped using it, things have not felt right. So me, as someone who's analyzing this, have to come up with a sort of model as to why this isn't working. Just so you understand where I'm coming from. Not saying everything has to be the exact way I've imagined it in my head, I would just like for things to be cool. Either way, I think this scene is the main culprit behind my issue. So, we learn about Float and we just move on. Later, as the fight versus Shiggy rages, Deku randomly uses Float, which is then followed by a flashback of him training to awaken it. What? This is such a clumsy sequence for a few reasons. For one, it's clear that this is what I like to call hype writing. Hype first, explanation later. We're supposed to get wowed by Deku's new ability and are then fed a quick excuse as to why this was possible now. The war arc has quite a few of these instances, for example Genis' survival or Mirio's return. And maybe I'm getting old and cynical, but I really cannot stand this style anymore. It's a huge shame to see MHA move towards it. Writing that relies on, oh my god, that just happened, really doesn't do it for me anymore. I need context, I need build-up, I need something to latch onto. The way these moments are presented just feels like an unearned climax that then necessitates a hasty excuse. But maybe more egregiously in the case of Float, it completely destroys any sort of relationship I could have had with the power. Instead of going from setup to build-up to release, we're given a vague setup that immediately leads to release, followed by some really hasty and unfulfilling post-build-up, which just doesn't work after the fact. Why not show me this mini-training section before the war? It doesn't need to be much, just a small, continuous subplot like with Air Force that pops up during the pre-war chapters. Hell, not only would it have been a cool way to build up this power, it would have given Zero, Froppy, and especially Uraraka more moments to shine, as well as presenting an opportunity for Deku to further inquire as to what Float means to him as a person. But as it stands, Nana Shimura's quirk is just an empty hype vessel with little to no context. And that's a massive shame in my opinion. And unfortunately, it doesn't get better from here on out. The next quirk, Danger Sense, is treated very similarly. While there is a nice touch of Deku unknowingly activating many times before the reveal, denoted by this little lightning here, but aside from that, Danger Sense just appears. And not only that, it appears and is then recognized by Deku, who knows about its existence, while we do not. He goes, oh, of course, the fourth quirk, and we're left asking, excuse me? This furthers the rift between us, and again, prevents us from really having any connection to the power. It's just this thing he can do now. There was nothing to it that made it special or memorable whatsoever, because it isn't given the time or the fanfare. If instead it had been revealed during the notebook scene, not only could the gradual increase in Deku's headaches during the war have worked as a sort of build-up, a little tease, it could have also worked in tandem with the Float training, as Bakugo mentions that he suspects the fourth user holds a secret. Through this, when Deku realized that he had been using Danger Sense without knowing it, it would have hit harder for us because we would have made that realization alongside him, thus forging an immediate experience with the power itself. Again, powers are kind of like characters in shonen manga. We need to attach to them, we need to relate to them in a way. We need to have a sort of parallel experience with them, otherwise it is hard to care. Otherwise they are just cool guns that our characters have. And, well, at this point, this approach is kind of set in stone and it doesn't get better. Smokescreen and Fajin, while both cool powers, suffer from the same issue. Vigilante Deku knowingly and confidently uses them without us ever seeing anything pertaining to them and what they mean to him and his progress. At this point, the cycle has completely broken down. No setup, no build-up, just climax. And I can't help but feel that it ends up coming across as rushed. I don't want a full arc on each quirk. If you genuinely think that's what I want, and I know there are people who think that, congrats, you win a gold medal in constructing Strawman. But fuck me, this is our main character, evolving and growing constantly, and all we are fed are his results. Admittedly, Fajin wasn't in a notebook, so you'd have to majorly retool the story for it to adhere to the cycle, but I still believe that it would be more satisfying than what we ended up getting. These aren't power-ups anymore even, they're just random cool things Deku can do now. Fajin gets the tiniest crumb of the first step re-injected as Deku hastily thinks of how to interact with his percentages. But that's really it. Deku has gained a tool belt of abilities, but we just don't get to see neither his reasonings, nor how to use them, nor how he made them his own. Which is a shame, because the villain hunt arc would have been a cool setting for him to scramble from fight to fight, trying to perfect Smokescreen and Fajin's integration, using the goons he fights as training dummies. But instead we just get him at his strongest immediately, and while that is raw as fuck, it feels empty and placid due to the lack of connection to his powers. Again, I don't dislike the villain hunt arc, and I don't dislike raw Deku, but I think it could have been better because these powers have so little context to us. They are just a thing he can do now. Also, just very quickly, this is sort of off topic, but I hate how no one around Deku ever questions his quirks. In a world where your quirks define you, someone suddenly awakening multiple new powers should be a huge deal. It should raise some eyebrows, but it just doesn't. Everyone is suddenly brain dead when it comes to Deku's powers, and it's really annoying. Like, they can make a joke out of it, Todoroki, but it's not cute anymore when it genuinely starts hindering my investment in the story. I will forever stand by my opinion that the scene where Deku tells Endeavor, one of the smartest characters in the series, a detective who has solved countless cases, he tells him about Black Whip, only for him to go, okay, sounds legit, I guess you have a new power now, is the dumbest moment in all of My Hero Academia. But anyway, luckily, this is a moot point since now everyone knows anyway. I just wish the road to this hadn't been so stupid, and you know, this is the one video I'm gonna make on this topic, so I thought I might as well mention it. So, in conclusion, what was once a carefully curated and well-paced story of progression for our main character has become a jumpy, hype-fueled mess that simply has no substance beyond, hey, look at this cool thing. And that is so incredibly disappointing, and easily My Hero Academia's biggest mistake in my eyes. As we approach the reveal of the final quirk, I hope that this issue can fade into the past, but as far as I'm concerned, this will remain a pretty ugly stain on an otherwise very smooth story cadence. Again, it doesn't ruin the story or Deku, but it is a huge part of his recent character growth that just is not treated with the weight that I would like to see it. Him having more quirks than just One for All is a big deal, but the story doesn't treat it as such. Him having suddenly this cornucopia of new abilities is a big deal, but the story doesn't want to spend the time on that. And I think that that is a huge dissonance between the substance and the form, and that's a shame. Hey, as always, thank you for watching, and a big thank you to all my patrons, including Daniel Garcia, Fictionape, Jameson Tate, Cini, Victor Perez, Cesar Londono, Trader, Ignis, Mr. Meander, and Paracha. Thank you all, I really appreciate all the help and support you give me, and I love making this stuff for you. I hope you keep watching, I hope you subscribe, I hope you like, and I'll see you around. Bye bye, take care.